So welcome everyone for the second day of the conference for Remix Comix. Feel very welcome. It's Friday afternoon. I'm happy that you all came and for the lectures and for the roundtable conversations. It's the second day, and the Remix Comix collective, we talked yesterday already about the aims of the Remix Comix project, and we want to connect communities, we want to work with communities, support communities, so that's also why the title of the conference is Comics and Community. Yesterday we learned a lot about the power of comics from Paul Gravett, and I hope that most of the things you learned yesterday are still here with you, and maybe you can connect it with the themes of today. Today we will talk more also about collectives that we are interested in and also what we can learn from these collectives. But besides that, we're also trying to find synergies with other types of art or other genres, and I'm very happy that we will have first a talk about Art Brut, which is overlapping with comics, and then Mazen Kerbay will also talk about music and how music and comics are similar or different, or they can also overlap in different ways. Just for you to know, this is the program. It's a little bit more than yesterday. Yesterday we had one lecture and some questions. Today we'll have 2 presentations, lectures, whatever you call it, and then we have a roundtable conversations. For the roundtable conversation, I really invite all the members of the audience also to participate, because talking about collectives, just sitting here as if we're the United Nations and that you're not part of it, I think that's not the way how we should talk about collectives. So please feel invited to join the conversation. But first we'll have the first lecture by Erwin Dejasse. I'm very happy that he's here with us. He's a comics scholar. We have comics artists, we have comics publishers, we have comics readers, but we have a comics scholar. So Erwin Dejasse is a comics scholar from Belgium. He's affiliated with the Free University of Brussels and a lecturer at the University of Liège and the School of Art Saint-Luc in Brussels. Coming from the Netherlands, our first in the desert of comic, which is the Netherlands, the first oasis for comics is actually Belgium. So for me it's very nice to have a guest from Belgium. Maybe you have a different opinion about that, but for me this means a lot. Paul Dejasse published in French and Spanish about Maurice Franquin, Peyo as well, and he did a PhD about Munoz and Sampaio. And his current research focuses on Art Brut and punk comics. This was also a reason why Stripburger wanted to invited him for the conference, because Art Brut or any unclassifiable work outside the common artistic environment always have been a great source for comics writers as well, for punk musicians. And the question is, what can we learn from the Art Brut as comics scholars or readers? And what does it teach us about the mainstream and the margins, as we are focused on the margins? So please give an applause for Erwin Dejasse.
Oh, thank you, Guido. Thank you for the applause. So I have to do a good lecture because you have already applauded. With the pressure. I stop with stupid jokes. So let's begin with the beginning. The Sex Pistols were probably not the very first punk band, although they were the very first punk band to reach an important audience. If the Pistols were not the first punk band, they clearly mark the mediatic birth of the punk movement. So their first gigs were very often described as an incredible shock for a whole generation of very young musicians, totally puzzled by their destructive, powerful energy. Okay, where it is? Okay, voilà. Yeah, François Keane states, what seems then so unbearable is not so much how they ostensibly insult and despise the public, but the radical desacralization in which they are engaged. What's the point if I can do the same? Ask angrily the ones who thrive on the need to admire. So, according to Keane, what's very important here, as you read it, is not the biggest provocation is to be amateurish, to do something that apparently everybody is capable to do. So here, what François Keane is emphasizing is of course, the do-it-yourself philosophy that is inherent to punk movement. At that time, rock music was dominated by stadium rock. Bands like Genesis or here Yes or Supertramp, and they were a real deterrent for punks. And the opposition is very clear if you compare with punk gigs, at least at the very beginning. I'm not speaking about later when the Pistols reformed themselves. That's completely different. But at the very beginning, the opposition is very clear if you compare with punk gigs, where the public is very close to the band, and they self tend to be part of the spectator. And it seems that the public is part of the spectator as much as the musician. So we can consider punk as a way to democratize music and also to bypass the institution. At the beginning, most of them play in small clubs with independent tour operator. So the idea of do-it-yourself is not only about the music itself, but all what's around the construction of the music. So punk had a huge influence, of course, on music. Everybody knows that. But also, for example, in literature, in movie, poetry, visual art, or fashion. Here are a few examples, like movie maker Galileo Kouichi, or poet Katy Aker, or visual artist Raymond Petitbon, or even fashion artist Vivienne Westwood. Well, what's the point with comics? The influence of punk on comics is also very huge, and perhaps has not been enough emphasized. US comics artist Gary Panther, who's often cited as the full embodiment of the punk into comics, states, he explained how he began to do the kind of stuff he will be famous for. Punk was really an art movement for the rejected kids. The nerds rule at that point, and I thought, I can really fit into that. I can relay on that. So at the end of the 70s, beginning of the 80s, the influence of punk in comics is everywhere to be seen. I will just present a few artists. Of course, there are a lot more. And what's also very interesting is that you can see that nearly everywhere in the world. I'm sure that among you know maybe Serbian comics artists or Slovenian comics artists of that period that I'm not aware of. I just present a few. I was already talking about Gary Panther, who's famous for this character of Jimbo. Here a detail, another one. In Japan, we have here Teruiko Yumura, who mainly signed King Terry. Here a detail. It's worth to show details of such a page. I will comment it a little bit later. Or if we are in France, the Bazooka Collective. Oh no, that's already Yumura. I should have removed the legend. It has nothing to do. It's very awful. Sorry. Or a member of the famous Bazooka Collective. Guido was talking about collectives, so punk were also, in the case of Bazooka, there were, it depends of the period, but between 5 or 7 young artists who came from Paris and who put this kind of punk ethos into comics. What was very funny is that that some of their publications were prohibited for minors. So you must be 18 to be able to read it, but some of the members at the time were 17 or 16, so they were not allowed to buy their own comics into bookshops. So here we have Olivia Clavel. So these works are characterized by what François Keane again described as a prude incompetence. Punk is driven by the complete rejection of virtuosity, the rejection of the know-how. I don't know, in French I was thinking about savoir-faire. It was difficult to, I'm not sure that know is the exactly synonyms. I don't know, Paul, yeah, it's okay. So everything that has to be to the technique, with the work, with what you learn, perspective during drawing. I don't know, a hand that looks like Leonardo da Vinci, for example. That's all this Barnum that most of punk artists want to throw away. So we have a creation that translates in the field of comics, feature that you can find in punk music. So this rejection of the unknown, this amateurish, deliberately amateurish work, or at least they seem amateurish. We can discuss about that later. So one characteristic I see is these are what you can say with caption bad drawing that seems hastily made, like you see here in Gary Panther, or also sharky narrative construction. If you will look at here Olivia Clavel, we have an encounter between Tintin, Tintin's character Professor Tournesol from Hergé, and he's meeting Clavel, iconic hero who's called TV. He's a guy with a TV in place of his head. And there is also it is also mentioned here the trial of a Soviet dissident, but it's put in the middle of the narration. We don't exactly see what is the relation between this trial, who was really in the news at that time, and that you see directly that she was. No, maybe I have to go back. Yeah, here. You see his head there, and it was taken from a photograph from the press. So here it's even, I say a bad drawing that seems hastily made. Here it's even not drawing, it's just taking an existing image and patching it on the page. And regarding the narration, it's nearly impossible to explain clearly what this page is really about. So, bad drawing, sharky narrative construction, dumb fictional argument. Could you imagine a more basic topic than the history of a constipated man who finally managed to shit? For example, that's a typical punk topic. Even the way the objects are made rejected the idea of sophistication, the idea of know-who. Here we have a pre-Bart Simpson Matt Groening, and the founder of Bart Simpson, of the Simpson family. Before that, he made a lot of zine like that. Maybe you recognize the style. So he was very involved with Panther into the West Coast punk scene at the end of the 70s, beginning of the 80s. So it's sure that zines exist long before punk came to light. But I think it is found there his favorite medium. Fanzine epitomized the do-it-yourself philosophy. Okay. I would like to synthesize a little bit all this characteristic. And I would state, if I can summarize that punk is driven by what I would call the childhood drive. Punk are acting like children, like little, maybe like unmaturated adolescent, without thinking about the social consequence of what they do. So let's go back to music. And rock music, mainly, is inseparable with visual creation, as the need of visual artists to design the record sleeve, posters, leaflet for concert, even T-shirts. You cannot think about rock music and also punk. Okay. Yeah. Also, you cannot separate completely the music with all that graphic design of all that visual stuff that are and I'm thinking that young people that today discover I don't know, the Clash or the Sex Pistols with this oh shit the Spotify, yeah, thank you, Guido. And they mainly wouldn't see the sleeve, wouldn't see the poster, are not able to read the credits, know who has done what. Sometime, and what you can remark already here, but there is a lot of punk records where you have comics. Here is one of them. Made by Jimmy Reid, so that's the one, I don't know if, no. He's also the one who did the famous iconic sleeve of the very first and only LP of the Pistols. But he made also that record sleeve. And yeah, one important thing, Jimmy Reid, who sadly passed away a few weeks ago. And of course, in the case of punk, so they look for the idea of having all this visual stuff that come with the music, and it was fundamental, of course, to adopt an aesthetic that embody a break that should be as radical as the music, of course. So Reid made this sleeve for the single "Holiday in the Sun," and in fact, he reused a commercial comics for tourism in Belgium, and he mixed the images and replaced the text in the balloon by the lyrics of the song. So here, for example, yeah, here is the original one. The little girl said, "Belgium has everything a young girl could ask for." And after that, he has mixed the image, and here, "I don't want a holiday in the sun, I want to go to a new Belsen." Maybe you know that Belsen was a Nazi concentration camp, but not Belgium, but Belsen. Or even the boy says, "And I'm happy as a sandboy on Ostend Golden Beach." I think it's between us, but the Belgium sea coast is the most horrible in the world, everywhere with buildings. Whoa. Okay, I have to see that. That's better in the Netherlands when you say that. And so here the boy says, "I'm as happy as a sandboy on a stand Golden Beach." And here it says, "I want to see some history because I got a reasonable economy." Well, another example also came in from the Sex Pistols, a promotional poster signed by an artist I don't know nothing about. I would like to church a little bit. It was called Mark J. And he used a graphic style that maybe, I don't know if Paul Gravett will agree with that, but it looks a little bit like the style of famous popular UK children weekly, the Beano. And sometimes when you look at that, I would say that it's a bit like what a child would have done by copying his or her children's book. I'm sure, as myself, that all of you have done that during your childhood. You try to redraw Tinta, Mickey Mouse, Condorito, or what you want. And often, I think this punk comics gives that kind of feeling. The use also of colored pencil, and also the fact that the page is unfinished, refers also to the amateurish and childish aspect of the work. And also, like I told you with Olivier Clavel, many punk creation reuse comics character, but they are often children mainstream character. Like here, Professor Tournesol, or here you have Yumura on interpretation of Tezuka's Astro Boy. But there are lots of examples, and you see everywhere in every culture there is this kind of reusing or recycling the icon of children popular comics. Okay, one question: why have comics become a prime medium for punk creator? Well, it's an hypothesis, but we can say that throughout history, comics has been violently attacked by educators, by parents' association, by politicians, and other guardians of the, let's say, guardians of the temple. If you see in different countries, for example, in France, there was a strong censorship after World War II. In the US, maybe you have heard about the Comics Code, who was also a kind of self-censoring the comic book. And you have an example in different parts of the world. And so comics has often been considered as the lowest level of literature. That said, I think that even today, I would say, okay, it's not the same as after World War II. One good example is that we are talking here about comics and it's financed by the European Council. So, okay, things have changed, of course. But I think that comics still smell of sulfur. I'm particularly struck by the use of expressions such as graphic novel, graphic literature, graphic narrative. So I will not say that graphic novel is not a pertinent concept, but I simplify it a bit. I think that it's often used to not use comics. I don't know, one of you, you talk with somebody, you are doing comics? I'm not really in comics. I prefer to name that graphic narrative. So this implied I'm not involved into this idiot childish stuff you are thinking about. Sometimes I think the expression is now a little bit disappeared, but during a long time we speak about adult comics. It's interesting because you will never hear it, I do adult literature. What kind of literature? Adult literature, adult paintings. And when it's necessary to precise adult comics, it means that a priori, comics are for children. If you have to precise that it's adult. It's just like if you are a girl and you are playing football, you are playing football, women football. Okay, that means that a priori football is something for the boys. Okay, so that's more or less the idea. It's clear that the cultural recognition of comics is not the same as it was, for example, 50 years ago. But I think that there is still an ambiguity, and I think the way that, for example, comics is often replaced by, for example, if I have to apply for a subvention, discussing with colleagues from the university, they say, okay, put maybe graphic narrative that would be better for the jury. So even if we say, okay, today comics has reached this peak of recognition, I think there is still this sort of ambiguity. So because of their low cultural status and because of their association with childhood, comics have kept a very strong, I think, subversive power. When you are doing comics, you are the one that nobody is listening to. You are like a children, you know. You stay under the radar, but because of that, you are much more free to point out what could be seen as disturbing. I think that by using comics, punk artists are like the child in this famous Hans Christian Andersen folk tale, The Emperor's New Clothes, where you have two crooks who would say to the emperor, okay, we will make you magnificent clothes, but be aware that they are invisible to who are stupid or incompetent. And in fact, the emperor is completely naked, and the only people who could say that the emperor is naked is a child. So I think that maybe it's the idea of punk, and the idea of punk recycling this kind of, let's say, low art is also a way, a kind of strategy to say that the emperor is naked. Okay, I go in a completely different direction with what we call Art Brut. I will come back to punk later, so we will leave punk for a moment and reach it at the very end of that lecture. What is Art Brut? It's a concept imagined by a French painter and wine merchant, Jean Dubuffet. So just after the end of World War II, Dubuffet was terribly disappointed by the visual art of his time. He was disappointed by academic works, but also by the avant-garde. Dubuffet decides to make travel in order to find works that have kept, let's say, a sort of authenticity. The kind of works that are not possible to find in the galleries or in the museum at that time. Works that, according to him, works that you can see, he says that the work that you can see in galleries or in museum have lost this kind of authenticity. So he went to psychiatric hospitals, prisons. He met people living in solitude without any cultural background, people living in a small village with nearly no social contact, meeting and discovering that, for example, he is painting the wall of his little house. So Art Brut is very difficult to define precisely, and if I begin to try, we have 2 or 3 hours, so that's very... but also he has written about 10 definitions. I mention here the most famous one. We can discuss, it's not very precise, but I think that with that sentence we can already, how to say, circle a little bit what he's talking about. So Art Brut are works produced by a person uncast with artistic culture. So what's the relation with comics? Since some 10, 15 years, I see more and more comics artists who claim their great interest for Art Brut. One simple thing is to go on Facebook or on Instagram to see what many comics artists post. It's often that they will show Art Brut works. It seems that the culture that is talking to them, and some of these comics artists also share the same reference from one. Many come from Art Brut. I will show a few examples. Here are a few sentences coming from a famous contemporary comics artist, like, for example, Dominique Goblet, who says, "I've always loved Art Brut. It comes from the gut, just like my own work." Olivier Jossot, Amel, say, "I'm not kidding when I say I'm blown away by children drawing, the so-called Art Brut, art singulier, or any elementary traits thrown with force, conviction, and spontaneity." I don't know if he's still thinking the same, but Paquito Bolino states in 1999, "The moment I met the Art Brut people, it gave me a bit of a buzz, and it changed the clock in my head a little bit." A big bit, yeah. So I'm not sure that because he chose the name Le Dernier Cri de Scientologie, Hôpital Brut, I suppose it's no coincidence. Maybe in the discussion Paquito will take about that later. What have this kind of work in common with comics? And I see at least 2 things. And I will take example from yeah, I show it to you. That's the catalog of an exhibition that took place last year between September 2022 and February 23, but that will be shown again last year in Ghent in Belgium if you are interested. And so I choose a few examples from that exhibition that I have curated. There were 33 artists. I will show a few of them. Like here, Oscar Voll. Oscar Voll was a tailor who drew pages like this during the 20s. He takes sketchbooks and with full of this kind of history without without words. Sorry. Another famous example, maybe is the most famous one, Erwin Dejasse, who's one of the very classics of Art Brut, who was a janitor with a very poor life. He was a janitor in a hospital, and a few weeks before his death, his neighbor, who was a photographer, who was an artist, discovered I think it's 40,000 pages of a story, and also a lot of big drawing. This kind of drawing that could be seen as a sort of expansion of the daily strips that you can find in US press at that time. Yeah, it was from I forgot to say that Oscar Voll came from Germany, and Dejasse came from the US, from Chicago. He worked as a janitor in an hospital there, and he took his inspiration from Comix. Mainly one comics was very famous at that time, Little Annie Rooney, who's the story of a little orphan that he redraw and put in his drawing. So yeah, another example here with a Serbian artist called Vojislav Jakic. He was the son of an Orthodox preacher. So his very first work was to draw the portraits of the dead in the cemetery of his village, and he made a lot of very strange composition like that one. Yeah, here you have Luigi Brunetti. It's a work that maybe if you are aware of very contemporary tendencies in comics, like abstract comics, for example, it's what's still quite marginalized part of comics, but it's a tendency that has emerged some 15 years ago. And if you compare to this kind of works, there are very much similarity. In fact, that's not really an abstract work. Brunetti was a very poor guy. He wanted to be a priest, and there was a convent next to the village where he was living. But the responsible of the convent thought that he was not intelligent enough. He didn't have the intellectual capacity to be a priest. But he was hosted in this convent, and when he was doing little works like working in the garden and so on. But when he had time, he redraw some magazines. Was nothing to do with comics. It's called, I don't know, I'm not speaking Italian, but it means the Catholic life. And so there were a lot of landscapes of photographs of church and so on. And he redraw and reinterpret them, putting also text. I don't think he was able to read, but he redraw the text. And sometimes he mix, when you read at that, you see that the legend that must be under a photograph is not at the good, let's say, the good place in his drawing. Maybe, yeah, another one, a bit more abstract. Or here, a Dutch artist, Karl Frans Drent, is born in 1921. He probably died, but I would be very interesting to have more information about him. But this guy was kept in a psychiatric hospitals during the 60s. He was freed at the end of the 60s when when the Netherlands began to use another way, look at psychiatry differently with the come of the anti-psychiatry, among other. And Drenthe, his plan was to write a book made with image and text. What's very interesting is that he explained, because there is one poetry magazine where there is a text by him. I don't know how they get in contact with him, where I explained that, well, I'm not an artist, but it's urgent to express these things. And he was he wanted to stand up against the abuse in psychiatric hospitals. And he wanted to make a book in 6 languages. So he had imagined the cover in a different language. So here you have drawing. Here you have the visit of Santa Claus, for example. It's often very comic, and but it's always this. Okay, you laugh a little bit, but there is always something dark in the background. Here you see the bad treatment that the people receive, and I like very much that drawing, which is a collage. It's Drenthe himself, so he made a photograph of himself and he put it on the drawings. Well, yeah, perfect. So Art Brut and alternative comics. Well, the comics artists I mentioned like Paquito Bolino, Dominique Goblet, or Olivier Jossuamel are key actors of a generation that emerged in the year 1990. That were very disappointed about how comics developed at the end of the 80s. Was at that time mainly in the French market, or French-speaking Belgian French market. You have to make series. All the book must have the same size, must be in colored, self-layout, self-number of pages, more or less the same style, and you have to use a genre to make a kind of detective comics, or science fiction comics, or cyberpunk comics, or post-apocalypse comics. The publisher were very interested in putting all this work in little boxes. And the mainstream publisher at that time, at the end of the 90s, nearly reject anything that could not enter into this category. In contrast, alternative comics creator and publisher, as I have formally claimed it, are characterized by what I would say a quest for new affordance of comics. And just as Paul Gravet emphasized it yesterday, he emphasized the great flexibility of comics. So I have really no idea if, for example, Luigi Brunetti or Wojciech Jakic did want to make comics. In some case, there are some works from Art Brut where you see that clearly they are influenced by that. Here you don't know exactly if it's, how to say that, if there is an influence, or if they reuse without knowing similar devices. But they offer great alternative opportunities for comics artists. So if we have to admit that alternative comics publishers are characterized by a quest for a new affordment, it is worth saying that all these works offer unprecedented solutions in terms of themes, narrative, structural, or graphic styles. I didn't finish my sentence, but Paul said yesterday that there is a great flexibility in comics. I think that these work that we can label comics or not, but they are also very flexible in using comics device. So let's go back to punk, finally. The time when alternative comics publisher emerged can be compared very much to the mid-70s when punk music emerged, with a new industry of music that was dominated by virtuosity and stadium rock band. Alternative comics are not just reminiscence of punk, But I think that nearly all of them have put punk as a reference. Maybe it's not the only reference, maybe it's not the major one, but it's one reference, with the idea of bypassing the institution and, in their case, bypassing the normalization of mainstream comics industry. In case of the mentioned author Bolino, Goblet or Josso Hamel, they all claim, and they are not the only one, for a punk heritage. As we consider the philosophy or maybe the ethic of do-it-yourself, it's a fundamental, punk is a fundamental landmark. Why are Art Brut, why Art Brut has influenced so much alternative comics artists, having escaped from the conditioning and the normalization of Art Brut creation, having escaped from the conditioning and the normalization, Art Brut creation embodied better than any other object, I think, the do-it-yourself ethics that drives punk movement. Thank you.
This feels a little bit like some exam or something. What I like so much about the childhood, you were talking about childhood creativity, and now we have babies in the audience, right? That's the best example, actually. Besides capitalism, time is our biggest enemy. We don't have much time to have questions. I have dozens of questions. Thank you very much for this wonderful talk. I don't know where to start, but I'm not going to start because you have been listening all the time. So let's do 1 or 2 questions, depending on how long they are. Anyone? I have many questions. I don't know where to start. Well, maybe very briefly, you said as a scholar of comics, you also have to deal with the fact that there's a low recognition of comics in the university. It's like an established institution. You already gave us some hints, but how do you cope with this fight for comics in academia?
I think the best thing is not excuse yourself for showing comics. Yeah, at the very beginning, in the beginning of the year 2000, when I gave the very first courses about comics history, for example, I made for an introduction where I explained that it's a kind of art that where the recognition failed, and at the time that was more true than today. For example, how they describe comics in a daily, for example, comparing to movies or literature. Today, I was thinking that comics was too late, but in fact, it was earlier, because today the chronic about comics in daily are completely horrible. But even the chronic about literature or movie has also become very bad. I think most of them. There are exceptions, of course. But finally, I thought I will remove that introduction where I explain why about the status of comics. I finally, mostly for the course about comics history, I thought, okay, I will show the works, explain what they do, what you can find them, how they are influenced, and so on. And if there is somebody in the room when I show, I don't know, Munoz of Sampaio or Hergé or Esamu Tezuka or Dominique Goblet, for example, who say, oh, that's this shit of comics. Okay, it's if you want to think about that, but I think that when you show the work, if they are still not convinced that it's something that is valuable, I don't think there is anything more to do.
Okay, that's the end of it. No, yes. Oh, there they are.
Okay, yeah, thank you very much for your talk. I'm Inkeri Aula from Finland, and I'm a postdoctoral researcher in visual communication design.
Nice to meet you.
And an anthropologist, but now I'm just getting into the comics research, so this kind of the academic and scholarly questions are super interesting to me. So can you say what do you think, what has changed in comics research during these past 20 years, and what's the most important change?
Yeah, it has changed a lot. That's true. I gave my very first course, I think it was in 2000, 2001, something like that. What has changed? It's clear that nobody will say to you now, okay, that's just only comics. I hear it at the beginning of the year 2000 sometimes. They didn't say that in front of me, but I hear by a colleague, he say, okay, why having a course about comics in the university? I'm not against, but... I think what has changed is not that the comics that are published now are better than 20 years ago, but you have works like, I would say, Jimmy Corrigan, L'Ascension du Mal by David Bay, or these works are sort of, how to say that, the word in English, in French we say the prescripteurs, they are prescriptive. And so I don't think that Chris Ware is better than, let's say, Franquin, for example, but it has everything that could cope with cultural recognition. Or like Mose, for example, you have a great argument about World War II Jews extermination. You have some, and you have also a work that renew completely the device of comics. So that has changed, but I think that the change came mostly from the student. After that, became a researcher. And it was clear that they were, for them, for that generation, not mine, or that half generation after me, it was very clear that we don't have to excuse yourself if you speak about comics. That was very different. And there are a lot of differences. You have courses about that, you have researchers about that, you have many PhD, maybe. I would be interesting to see how much they are if you compare with other medium. I think we'll be surprised. But at the other end is that they are not so much, how to say that, structure that are heavy enough to stay. To have a structure that will study or give course to comics and that will stay 10, 20 years, and that people will think, okay, if the teacher is out of work, we will replace it. It's only very fragile how it is. Also, and that has nothing to do with comics, but it's more the system of today, of you have always to find money back to pay and to renew all the thing, and so that's a problem that comics came very late, with the very late car of the train, and that's a problem.
Okay, thanks. We have time for one short question and a short answer.
Okay.
Sorry for the pressure.
I hope it will be short. I just wanted to ask you, since there's been a debate in Slovenia for quite some years now, and we're in the moment where some people are actually going to write a comic dictionary in Slovene language. But there is quite a few interesting things. People sometimes don't know whether to say something is a picture book or whether something is a comic. But I noticed some panels here that I would maybe consider more of a picture book. For example, the one in the psychiatric institution. Yeah. And I was just wondering where maybe it's just that in Slovenia we understand that in different directions, or how come you, for example, choose to put this also in your presentation, and whether you consider this a comic?
Yeah. I've simplified it a bit, but when we organized that exhibition, the idea was, I don't think that the question if these works are comics or not, I don't think it's particularly important. It's clear that there are works that can cope with the narrowest definition you can find of comics. You have captions, you have image, and so on. And of course, if you have here Drent or Brunetti, for example, it's not so clear. At the other end, if you look at mainly what the alternative publisher has done since 30 years, if you publish that in a book and it's just published. I have mostly French-speaking reference, but Frémaux, for example, could clearly publish this kind of work in his collection of comics. And it is seen. So you have, it's the idea that comics is, let's say, a language with some device that can vary, and at the other hand, it's also a cultural practice. And it's something that is moving all the time. So every time you see something different that comes in comics, for example, abstraction, then you have to reread the whole history of narrative image and look back, and you will think that maybe what Henri Michaud did with Little Patches is very similar to what Lévis Trondheim did with his abstract comics, for example. So it's the idea of, but okay, we know that Tinta is a comics, for example, that Superman is a comics. You can surround it, but there is no frontier, there is no circle that is very clear. You have things that are on the side, and I think it's okay.
Okay. At the beginning, you were not sure whether you deserved an applause, but now I think you
okay.
You can have that applause. Thank you very much.